Hello gamers, Powered Heal here, and today we're going to be talking about Corepunk while playing World of Warcraft. This is actually live, not pre-recorded, so maybe you'll get to see me die on hardcore, hopefully not. But yeah, about 3 days ago, Corepunk did their, what is it called? The Great Reset, yeah, that's what they call it. And this was basically a server reset for kind of like, you can think of it as the beta server. It's kind of like in closed beta right now. You have to buy in, I think it's like $30. And if you buy in, you can access the server at any time. But for a while, it hadn't been wiped since their last wipe. So this is kind of like the new wipe, and it's supposed to have new content. There's supposed to be a raid that's coming out. It's not out right now. I think it's coming out in like a week or something like that. And they made all these changes allegedly and stuff like that. And I played the game way back, kind of like 2 years ago. I think going on at this point, maybe a year ago. I definitely did play it 2 years ago, but I'm trying to think like how long I actually played and if I came back for little periods. So it's like a year or two ago, basically, since I last played. And I was like, yeah, maybe I'll check this out, because originally I did like the idea of the game because it is an isometric top-down game, which I'm not a huge fan of. But they're basically trying to make an isometric top-down game that plays like World of Warcraft. That was the initial thought process. And I was like, hey, that's really cool. Obviously, love WoW. Particularly WoW Classic is kind of what they were modeling the game after, actually. And they've like explicitly said this before. So I was like, hey, that sounds good. I'll try it out. And initially, I had kind of a lot of fun with the game, but there were just a lot of problems. Like, there wasn't much content, was kind of the main issue. And the game was also just very difficult for new players to get in. And certain classes were like pretty good at soloing stuff, but other classes were like really bad at soloing stuff. And if you ended up on a class that was kind of really bad at soloing stuff, your progression curve was kind of really weird because basically you were more efficient by going out into the world and farming a bunch of resources, crafting like a full set of gear, and then using that to help you defeat the content. You couldn't really kind of just go in and start fighting the content and getting drops from that content and stuff like that, or just even fighting the content without drops. It was kind of too hard in a lot of classes. So there were definitely a lot of progression problems and a lot of incomplete things. Even though I did have fun with the game, I was playing a class that was particularly strong in PvE. So my class was Ranger, and basically what you would do on Ranger is you would just kind of, you do sort of the early intro quests, and then you would go out into the PvP zone, and you would farm some skeletons there, and you would make pretty good gold as well as experience there, and you could just get to level 20 like that. A lot of other classes just didn't really have a similar route to max level, right? It was a bit more complicated, and I think that turned a lot of people off, so not a lot of people played the game. And the reason why I kind of stopped playing the game is because at some point there was just nobody playing and kind of nothing to do, right? Like the server was basically completely dead. There was no PvP happening. There was nothing like that, right? And there wasn't really like a ton of in-game. That didn't really bother me though, because I can have fun just kind of roaming around the game and PvPing, but there was basically nobody even on the server to do that. So that's that. And then you kind of flash forward to where we're at now. And it seems to me that I think what they did is they started to panic over the fact that nobody was really playing the game. And instead of recognizing that it was because of all these problems of just things being unfinished in general, they really seemed to key in on the fact that, they were having all these issues because the game was too directionless, right? So they added an MSQ, and in the MSQ, you get like really good gear out of the MSQ by the end, and there's some quests that kind of go beyond the MSQ. But basically, if you follow the main quest line through the main game, and then you follow the one that goes into the steps, you'll end up with like really good tier 3 equipment, which in that game is like some of the best equipment. And you won't really have to do much crafting to kind of like finish out your gear. Unless you do some of the content where you basically have a chance of like dropping all your gear, and you actually do, and then I guess you would have to start from scratch, actually crafting and getting your gear. But yeah, so you basically get everything like really early on now. It's a very streamlined, almost theme park type experience, and that's kind of the exact opposite of what I wanted. I kind of hate that, right? I don't like the idea that you can just get everything from doing the initial quest chain now. It seems really lame. Maybe before it was a little bit too kind of balance in the other direction, especially because it was required for you to progress. So like before, like I said, you would kind of go out and you would do a bunch of gathering, then you would refine those resources, you would make them into items, and that's how you would essentially progress your character. So maybe that system was a little bit too harsh, because you need to do so much actual gather crafting before you could even interact with the game itself. But there can be a happy medium there, right? You can have it be so that you can go out into the world, kind of just getting starter gear or getting some drops from these mobs and stuff like that to let you progress on to harder mobs. And, you can actually make it so that if you're level 11, you can slay level 11 creatures without, just getting curb stomped by them if you don't have up-to-date gear. So there's definitely a lot of room there for, how would you say, like, optimization. Like, like, they didn't have to make this change where they completely lean over into giving you everything, right? There's a lot of gradients along the way that they could have stopped at and made that adjustment to make things feel a little bit more fair if you're not going to do a bunch of crafting at the start, but also reward players that were doing the crafting. That's the other thing, too, is the crafting seems to be mostly kind of useless now, at least for, like, actual gear, because you get so much good gear from the initial story quest. I guess if you want to change stuff up like that, or if you do, like I said, there are some modes where you can lose your gear, and if you opt into those and you do lose it, then you would probably need to recraft it, I assume. But for the most part, you don't really have to do much gathering at all, gather crafting initially. And it's not even really that good to make money, it seems like, because they basically added this PvP, or there's two versions. There's a PvP instance and a PvE instance. It's called Prison Island, and you basically can go into this place and you just go in there and there's a bunch of mobs. You slay the mobs, you get really good loot, and these things called coins that you can use on the auction house. And what this does is this basically lets you buy anything you want, right? So if you do need to craft certain things, you need certain epic resources from the wild and the wilderness, because those are the only things I think you can't get in Prison Island, are the epic resources. You can just buy them from the auction house. And it's a little bit weird, though, because how it works is when you go into Prison Island, you actually get these coins, and these coins are kind of a pseudo-currency. There's gold in the game, but you can't trade gold between players. So these coins are how the auction house allows you to interact with the players. You basically sell stuff on the auction house, you get a balance of coins there, and then you can buy other people's stuff with those coins. But it still requires a gold fee to do the transactions, and a coin fee to do the transaction on the auction house. So if you're doing Prison Island, basically the thought is you get a bunch of these coins, and then you can buy whatever you need from the auction house. And if you get coins from the Prison Island, you can sell the coins to a vendor, which gives you gold. So you also have a kind of like a renewable gold thing. So you can use that to pay for the fees in the auction house and stuff like that. The problem is if you don't participate in this Prison Island system, it's kind of difficult to get ancient coins or coins, which are the things you use to buy and sell all this stuff, right? So what that means is that you would have to, go on the auction house. So you'd have to sell stuff on the auction house to get coins, right? The problem is when you sell stuff on the auction house, the coins you get stay in a balance on the actual auction house itself, which means you can't actually withdraw them. Now this is important because the coins, you can sell them, like I was saying before, in order to get gold for when you need to pay the auction house fees or need to buy things from vendors and stuff like that. You don't have that flexibility when you sell something on the auction house and you get coins. They go into an auction house wallet type of deal that you can't draw them out of. So what that means is that if you're trying to do something like I like to do in these games, where you're kind of just gathering and you make your whole set of gear by just kind of I'm farming this one resource, because how it works in that game is you can only specialize into one resource farming method at a time, and you need to be fully specialized into it to get the rare resource or the epic resource. So I did logging. I went fully into logging, and I got some blood honey, which is the epic resource, and I sold it on the auction house for 300 coin, which is pretty good. Except the problem is that in order to keep selling stuff on the auction house or even buying stuff on the auction house, I need gold, and I can't use any of the 300 coin that I quote-unquote got from the transaction I made for the blood honey I can't use any of those coins to sell them to a vendor in order to get gold for myself to be able to post the next transaction. What this basically means is that if you're trying to just gather and sell stuff on the auction house, you're going to at some point need to stop and do quests or do Prison Island in order to get, enough baseline currency just to be able to sell your items, which makes absolutely zero sense. And I kind of understand if they wanted to prevent, people from sitting on the auction house and just merchanting all day, because although I do think in some cases merchanting can, in some cases it can provide some much needed liquidity to the game for certain resources depending on what people are actually merchanting and stuff like that. But in a lot of games, it does just kind of harm the game. I think, people are just like, they're sniping items a lot of times with like bots and stuff like that. Even if they weren't using bots, though, they're just kind of sitting on the auction house, constantly refreshing. They're sniping items, reposting them for a higher price. You're not really making meaningful contributions to the community in most cases, unless you're one of those guys that is dealing with a bunch of like bulk resources or something like that. They're required for crafting. So, I think that if you're going to have a thing that limits transactions so that people can't merchant all the time, that's cool. But what you need to do is, instead of making it cost like coins or whatever to post on the auction house, it should cost a currency that you can get by just, doing anything in the game. So basically, if you participate in the game at all, if you're slaying monsters out in the world, if you're doing quests, if you're gathering, you get these coins from all of these sources, and therefore you can actually post on the auction house no matter what you're doing, right? So if you just wanted to be like a gather bot, you could kind of go out and do a bunch of gathering, and then you'd still be able to post on the auction house because you'd have this currency that you could use, and then you could maybe trade some of that currency in for gold as well to be able to get the auction house fees. Or maybe you could put it so that if you were farming natural resources from the world and posting them there, you wouldn't have to pay the gold fee. But something has to change, because how it is right now, you can't really do the playstyle of being, going out and being the resource getter, unless you want to like hawk all the stuff and trade, which I guess technically you can do, but it seems silly to me that they make an entire auction house and then certain cohorts of the player base are just unable to use it, right? So wasn't really impressed about that. They've also done this new thing that's really weird where in order to make something, so before you used to have the recipe, and you would learn the recipe and then you can make infinite amount of said thing. But now you need a new copy of the recipe for everything you make. And to me, it's just kind of pointless because I don't know why you would ever want your system to be kind of gatekept by the amount of recipes that drop. It really doesn't make sense, because let's say that you're trying to do you're a gathering person, right? Well, at some point you need to now go on the auction house and either buy these recipes that other people have found, or you need to venture into the PvP island and get recipes that way. Because if you do that, or if you don't do that and you're in the world gathering resources, then you can never actually make the items because you don't get recipes from doing the gathering. So that's another really weird thing that I think just makes absolutely zero sense. And a lot of these choices, in my opinion, probably come down to them trying to protect against RMT in some form. I think that's why we have this gold system separated from the coin system, and why you can't like directly trade gold and stuff like that. But to me, it just makes zero sense, right? There's really no reason for this. You're limiting the player base far too much to accomplish that goal. I think for bots in most of these games, you just have to ban them, right? That's the bottom line solution. You can't really be creating your game in a way that's immune to bots, because it creates these like awkward, weird systems that cause these like insular reactions within the game. Like, again, like I can't even play my merchant style gameplay, right? Because, I just can't sustain it because I don't end up getting the gold I need or the coins I need from farming stuff in the wilderness that allows me to actually post stuff on the auction house. So, yeah, just I haven't really had a fun experience, and I don't really think I'm going to be continuing to play. And I think a lot of it is just, it's due to the pivot, from the original kind of ideals that they had to, they see a lot of people aren't playing the game, and they're panicking, and they're trying to convert it into this theme park style game that has this really clear through line to the end game, and they give you the Prison Island thing, which is like the clear thing to do at endgame, and that's their endgame. But I don't think they realize that when they do that, it just makes people kind of get through the game quicker and gives them an endpoint to hit quicker. And there's not really much room for exploration or anything like that. And it just seems really kind of lame to me. And I think the combat and stuff and the actual, gameplay, it doesn't really feel that great either. My class, like whatever it was I was playing, whether it was Ranger, whether it was Rogue, it just didn't really feel like it had a good identity. Just like some random abilities thrown on there. Like my Rogue has like this like electric trap, and it has like stealth, and it has an ambush and stuff like that, but it doesn't feel like a coherent class kit like something like WoW Rogue does, if that makes sense. Like it doesn't feel anything like vanilla Rogue. It just kind of feels terrible and mid, I'm not gonna lie. And apparently I talked to a guy who has played Rogue basically from the start, basically back when I used to play Ranger, and he's saying that the current form of Rogue is actually really bad, especially in PvP as AP, which is just insane to me. I don't know how, when you think of a class like Rogue, you think of, high attack power, high burst, physical damage, bursting people down from 0 to 100 or controlling them, something like WoW Rogue, right? But nothing of the sort, right? Just kind of completely different. If you want to play that bursty one-shot style, apparently you have to play for magic damage. So you have to build your Rogue around magic damage. And I don't know, it just seems super odd to me. Also, it seems like the classes that are really good, both in PvE and PvP, are the Defender, which is basically like a tank class. I think this is just awful. Like, I don't know, whenever tanks are good in your game PvP, it's a problem, right? So that doesn't seem very fun. And I just think that ultimately they panicked, and they tried to lean into this whole, that they think that like every game needs an MSQ now, right? Every game needs super solid handholding. But in reality, if your game was actually kind of good to play and sort of even close to finished, I think a lot of people would have a positive opinion of the game. But because so much of the game is not really finished, there's not a lot of content in the game and stuff like that, people never really got a chance to get into it and see if they enjoyed it or not. And again, I think the classes themselves really aren't that enjoyable. And when the classes themselves aren't really that enjoyable, and the game itself is just not finished yet, then it's going to be a hard sell, I think, for most players, right? There's really no reason for them to stick around. And I think that's where I'm at now, right? It's just like the classes that I'm playing just don't really feel fun. Not really a fan of the direction they've chosen to go in the game in terms of just making everything super accessible, right? I think it just kind of kills off a bunch of the motivation to do the gathering crafting, which I actually really liked. And, having to just go into this extraction style dungeon all the time and that's the best thing I can do basically to progress my character, just seems like super lame. If anything, I want to be going into different dungeons and farming specific items from the dungeons, but this doesn't seem like it's going to be a game like that, and I don't think it'll ever really get to that point. I think we're stuck with this Prison Island place for a while. Like I said, there's a raid that's supposed to be coming out, but I think that this took a lot of development time to make, and we're probably not going to get many of these very often. So I think the end game loop is just going to be do the Prison Island stuff to get the currency you need to upgrade your character. Just do that ad nauseum. The open world is going to be completely forgotten, and then go and do the raid when you're available to do it, and that's going to be the end of things. So yeah, I'm just not really big fan. I feel like they've kind of forsaken their original design intentions, and the game is probably going to be nothing like World of Warcraft Classic when initially it was supposed to be an isometric version of it. So yeah, not really feeling Corepunk. Probably won't be playing too much more of it. We'll see, maybe that'll change, but would I recommend it? Honestly, I probably would have recommended it more before, which is crazy because there were a lot of quality of life things that were missing that they kind of have gotten around to, which do make the game a little bit more enjoyable, but because the direction of the game is just so different now, I don't even think it's worth it to participate in the game, right? At least before, I was kind of willing to put up with all of the kind of like the mess that was the quality of life aspects of the game, because I did like kind of like the core direction they were going. But now it's just like I don't even like the end game. I don't think I'm gonna like being an end game with any of the classes that I picked, right? So what is even the point? And I feel like they kind of gutted my gathering systems and stuff like that. So yeah, can't really recommend. But I don't know if you like a really streamlined gameplay experience and you like an isometric top-down League of Legends style game, then maybe give Corepunk a try. It is $30 though. So let me know what you guys think down below in the comments if you've played Corepunk or if you're interested in getting into the game. But yeah, I think for now it's going to be a no for me. So I'll see you guys next time.